Hey, it's Kevin. Welcome back to another episode of kev-tv. Getting, well, sort of nostalgic today, or actually really touching on nostalgia. So you even went back, wore the 1972 Paul Popovich Cubs uniform. Yeah, I don't want to have to show you my fat belly, but trust me, it's a Paul Popovich. And it's funny is I think my entire life I've been one of those kids who was always into nostalgia. Now, I guess I have to put a caveat on that though, because back in the mid '70s, when I think America went through its last big nostalgia craze, back when Happy Days was the number one TV show in the nation, back when Grease came out, and we were in the '70s looking fondly back to the 1950s, I wasn't much into either of those things. But I've always loved old advertising. I've loved just looking into old things. I talk about in my podcast, masonminute.com, if you want to check it out, and we touch on nostalgic topics there. But also, I've got just a plain old regular blog. It's almost become my nostalgia blog, I guess you'd say. It's at kevmania.com, KEVMANIA.com. And it's just all the stuff that, runs through my mind. A lot of it's pictures, some of it's video and things like that, but it's not just video specific like this is. But a couple of the topics just things that I've wondered about over the years were nostalgic in form. Recently, my wife and I took a road trip to Shakeys Pizza. And the reason I say road trip is because we both grew up with Shakeys Pizza in our life. And I've got some really cool stories back, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s and early 90s about eating at Shakeys throughout the country. And my wife has similar stories. And it was a cool place. If you've never been, you want to check it out online and go to their Wikipedia page and learn all about it. But we found out there was one, I wouldn't say close by, in Alabama, in Auburn, Alabama, about a 5-hour drive. And we were bored one Sunday, or I think it was Saturday actually, and weren't doing anything and needed something to like break out of the mold. So we drove to Alabama for pizza, and it was great, and it was just like we remembered. I think that was kind of the cool thing. And then I've touched on Kevmania before about Mr. Donut, the old Mr. Donut shop, which I actually found a lot of people didn't know of Mr. Donut. You had to live in certain places naturally, and just they had just neat looking buildings, and of course they had good donuts too, but got bought out by Dunkin' Donuts in the early '90s and kind of went away. But they still exist in like the Philippines and Taiwan. And then I touched on Beetle boards. I had a Volkswagen Beetle as a kid in the '70s, and people used to, back before you could put stickers all over cars, would have them painted to do advertising. And I'd actually looked into having my Beetle, touched for advertising, where they'd paint up your car and they'd pay you a stipend and give you gas money to drive around. You had to put up so many miles on your car, and I'd make money and drive. I thought it was a cool idea, but they were only doing cool cigarettes, and because I wasn't 21 yet, they weren't even going to consider me. And I think what's interesting about nostalgia is the romance of nostalgia. I love getting nostalgic. I spend a lot of time, just in my spare time, looking at those. I grew up in blank city on Facebook. I remember blank city, especially some of the cities I grew up in, the Virginia Beaches, the Quincy, Illinois, even learning about Nashville and how it was back in the day. And I love spending time in those, and I get lost for hours and hours and hours in those things. But while I love the romance of nostalgia, I don't want to go back. You couldn't pay me to go back. And they weren't necessarily, fond days to remember. They were just glimpses of fondness. And maybe it was simpler times. I'm not quite sure what it was. The romance of nostalgia. And I don't know if it's just me. I don't know if a lot of people feel the same way. But I get nostalgic every now and again. But I don't want to go back. Another episode of Kev TV coming up here. KevinMason.tv, of course, our lifetime home now. You can also, again, check out my blog, kevmania.com. Or you can always check out my daily podcast, too, the masonminute.com.